Welcome back to Two Doctors Homestead. My name's Daniel, and this is another 30 Days of Preparedness 2025 video. Hashtag hash brown it, send it to the internet. 30 Days of Preparedness 2025. Want to thank once again Michelle, JJ at Big Valley Living for inviting us to the collaboration. It's been fun. It's been fun digging out the preps, making the videos. We've been pretty light this year on making videos, so it's been fun to get back into it and appreciate all the comments. Something we've been doing. I did an intro video, but every video since then, we've just been asking, what do you guys want to see? You follow the channel. If you check out our channel, we made a lot. We made hundreds of prepping videos. So for me, I'd rather just open it up, right? What do you guys want to see? What do you want us to do? We had the request about books. We had a lot of questions about books, so we did a prepper library. We had questions about a get home bag, so we did the get home bag. And we had questions about prepping in an apartment. So that's what we're doing today. I think this is our last video for 30 Days of Preparedness 2025, but I'm happy to keep going, right? So if there's anything you'd like to know, ask a prepper, right? We thought about doing that as a video series, ask a prepper. Any questions, anything you want us to cover, we're going to keep making videos, right? Our channel doesn't go away on October 1st. Actually, I got a video I need to do for Pink Spoon MREs for breast cancer awareness, so we're going to be working on that here pretty soon. We'll drop that in October. But if there's anything else you want to see, let me know. Happy to sit down, make the video, talk through it with you. So today's apartment prepping, small spaces prepping. We did a video about 6 months ago on this, but I wanted to kind of bring it back out, rethink through it, the topics, what I would cover, some of the key points, right? And as I mentioned before, we don't live in an apartment now, if you follow the channel. But I've lived in an apartment. I grew up in apartments, lived in apartments as an adult. I've lived in apartments a lot in my life, so I'm well aware, right, of the what it's like to live in an apartment, right? And I've had some nice ones, and I've lived in some not very nice ones in bad neighborhoods, kind of the whole spectrum, right? So I get it. Not every apartment is the same. Technically, you could be in a penthouse and a high-rise and call that an apartment. You could be in a low-end duplex and call that an apartment, right? So a lot of the challenges are going to be the same. Had a friend that decided, hey, we're going to sell the house and go live in an RV. And he and I talked a lot about prepping there too. So some of what you would encounter, challenges and solutions. We're going to give you both challenges and solutions, whether you're in an apartment or an RV. Some of it relates, right? Some of the same challenges, some of the same solutions. So I've got three main challenges we're looking at here. Storage space, generally, once again, you might have a huge apartment, you might have a small apartment. Some apartments have garages, some don't, right? So this is really going to depend on you and your situation, but generally storage space is more of an issue I have found in personal experience in an apartment and certainly in an RV, right? Storage space can be a challenge. We're going to talk about that and some possible solutions. Security, right? We'll get into that. There was the thing that happened in Colorado. Tres de Agua, whatever it was, sort of took over an apartment. At least that's what it seemed like. There's some security issues, proximity. We'll get into that, right? We'll get into that a little bit, talk about some solutions. And then replenishment, right? Long-term prepping requires replenishment. You might have a year's worth of food stashed away. At some point, you're going to have to get more, right? So replenishment, water catchment, those kind of issues. We'll talk about that a little bit too. So let's get into it. Let's get into some solutions, some of the challenges. So food, right? We need food to survive. We did the rule of threes. That was the intro. I probably didn't have to tell you that you need food to survive, right? That's pretty straightforward. We have pigs, we have rabbits, we have chickens, we have dogs. They all need food to survive. So do I, right? We all need food to survive. That's kind of a given. How much food? Well, we did the Prepper Pantry series for a long time, and that kind of came down to, we said the average, right? I think it was FDA average is 2,000 calories a day. That's going to depend on you. That's going to depend on your metabolism, your life, your situation, and your activity level, right? Higher activity levels. Some people say in a life-threatening situation, survival situation, SHTF, disaster situation, maybe you need 3,000, maybe you need 4,000, right? You can get something like a Fitbit, got a little Fitbit. It actually tells me more or less how many calories I burnt in a day. So you can figure out how many calories you actually need per day, and then how long, how much stash do you want, right? And once again, apartment may have storage issues. So something I'm going to offer as a possible solution, and we've done videos on these, is 5-gallon bucket. This happens to be an Atwood's bucket, right? You can stash this full of food in a Mylar bag, and we made videos on that. You get the 5-gallon Mylar bags, not super expensive. You get the bucket, you get the oxygen absorbers. Think about things like rice, beans, oats, flour, wheat berries. There's a long list, and we made videos on it, and I can certainly answer questions if you guys have a list or have something in mind. But this will hold 20, 25 pounds, and that depends on which thing we're talking about, whether it's beans or rice or oats or any of that. There's different densities. 25 pounds of rice, that's going to get you maybe 3 weeks, maybe more, plus or minus. Do the math on the calories, depending on the kind of rice and whatnot, in one bucket. So we could say 3 weeks, 3 weeks of food in one 5-gallon bucket. They stack pretty easily. So if you had the space, right, depending on where you're at, your kind of storage, you can start stacking away weeks or months worth of food. And when you do the bucket yourself, and when you do the Mylar bag, and you do the oxygen absorbers, and you're talking about stuff like flour, right? Talking about things like a bag of rice, it's not as expensive. You can get it down to $2 a day or less, right? Depending on obviously where you're buying it and the bulk and the regional, right? I could give you prices here. In the last video we did, most of our bucket videos, I break down the cost of the bucket and the lid and the 5-gallon bag and the Mylar bag, the oxygen absorbers, and the ingredients. But that's really going to depend, right? Where you're buying the buckets, where you're buying it all, regional prices. You're going to Sam's Club, you're going to Costco, you're going to Walmart, whatever it is. Happy to do the math, happy to share the link on those. But just as a thought, possible solution, once again, 5-gallon bucket, you're talking 3 weeks maybe worth of food, depending on what you choose to put into it, maybe a little bit longer if you're rationing. They do stack, right? So that's my solution in the beginning, right? Your short-term food solution, very economical, right? You have to think about food preparation. So if you've got 25 pounds of beans requires water to make unless you're chewing crunchy beans. Same thing with rice, requires water to make, so you have to have the water. Oats, flour, any of those, how are you going to prepare the food if there's an emergency? But some of that can last a very long time if stored properly. You could even say 20, 30 years on things like rice and beans. So you get your bucket of rice, you put it in the corner. It's there. It'll be there for a very long time, and you probably spent $30 on that for 3 weeks of food. So options are there. That's your tight spaces. Even if you have a lot of space, it's not a bad option when you're talking about building that long-term food storage, right? This isn't necessarily a rotational pantry. Certainly have a rotational pantry, but once again, it comes down to space, especially RV, trailer, anything like that, small apartment, space is premium, right? So that's the food. We're going to talk about food. So now water, right? You need water. We did that rule of threes. You already knew you needed water, even though I said that. First one we'll hit is water bottle, and I'm going to take a hit on the water bottle. I've been getting my throat dry making these videos, and you guys don't want that. So in terms of buying water, there's two kinds of water. There's stored water and then things like filtered water, right? How much water you have stored, and then how much water do you have available in things like a creek or something like that. Stored water, price per gallon, I've done the math several times. Generally, the water bottles is going to be your cheapest price per gallon, right? You can get a case, $3, $4, depends on where you're at, depends on the brand, depends on what store, all that kind of thing. Case of water, right? So the average or the recommendation is 1 gallon per person per day. But basic water bottles, one of the advantage of water bottles is they're individual packaged, so they're easy to carry, right? If you take a 5-gallon bucket and fill it full of water, or you get the 7-gallon jugs, that gets pretty heavy pretty quick. Stack of water bottles, right? Easy to carry, very portable. Something to think about, right? Whether you want to have a couple extra days worth of water, weeks worth of water, months, whatever it is. You know, water lasts a long time. Water's very old. Water's been around for a long time, right? So you do have to rotate, and it is hard to rotate on basic water bottles. In the terms of what I mean by that would be if you had a 50-gallon barrel, you could dump it, rinse it, refill it. You're not going to dump, rinse, and refill these. I guess you could refill them, but you can drink them, right? You could cycle it out. So if you got 3 or 4 cases of water or whatever you got, you could drink some and then get a new one, right? That kind of thing. You need water to survive. A second option on water, and we probably showed this before, Aquapod. So there are a couple different brands that make them. This is made in the USA. This holds over 65 gallons. And if you see in the picture, it goes in your bathtub. So if there's an emergency and like a tornado, storm's coming, whatever it is, hurricane, whatever the situation is, you could actually take this out. You put it in your bathtub, you fill it up, and it holds 65 gallons of water. And it actually has a little dispenser pump that comes with it. It says 2 weeks of water for a family of 4. Fills a standard tub to capacity. Can't speak. So something like this. These didn't used to be expensive. I didn't price it out. I know everything's going crazy. You used to get them on the Red Cross website. Now I think you can get them on Amazon. 65 gallons. That's a lot of water. If you're one person, that's over 2 months at a gallon a day. It says 2 weeks, family of 4. Right? Do the math however you want. If your apartment has 2 tubs, then you could get 2 of these, right? They're not expensive. You can store them. Generally not going to be reusable, right? It says one-time use only. The problem is you're going to have water in it, and you're never going to be able to really get it dried out to the point that you're not going to have mold and stuff growing in it. So those are one-time emergencies only, but if that emergency hits and the opportunity's there, you could fill this up. That's a lot of water stored. That could last you, one person, a couple months. If you had 2 tubs, now you got 4 months worth of water. Not very expensive, right? And you add the water. You add the water in the water bottles. So that's your food and your water, right? Solutions and challenges. Replenishment. Now we go from short term, whatever you had stored, whether it was a week, a month, 3 months, a year, whatever the situation is, whatever reason you're trying to bug in, right? You're prepping, you're trying to stay in your apartment. At some point you will run out of supplies, right? That's just guaranteed. Assuming you outlive your supplies, right? I guess I had to say that, but at some point you'll run out of supplies. So you have to replenish. Well, that's harder in an apartment, maybe harder in an RV, right? Where I'm at, I've got Homestead, I can start planting food. And I know there's a lot of logistics around that. I'm not saying it's that easy just to take a packet of seeds and grow your own food for a year. But it would be an option if you have the space, right? Having a garden, having some way to grow food, some way to replenish your food, right? That's harder, generally harder in an apartment, and we'll talk some solutions on that potentially. Replenishing your food, replenishing your water. Like I have rain gutters, I can do water catchment. If you're isolated in an apartment, it's harder to do water catchment. If you have a community, and I'll kind of slip into the solution there, if you're in an apartment complex, if you're in an apartment building, and you have a strong neighborhood watch, you have a strong community, HOA, if they're nice, if you know them, maybe you can create a community, and the yard can become a garden, and they can do water catchment off the roof, and everyone can share that. That's probably not going to be the case for most people, just from what my cynical view of the world and the places I've lived. But if you're in that situation where it becomes just a huge community and you're doing water catchment and you're growing food in a garden, whether it's in the courtyard, by the swimming pool, you could drink out of the swimming pool potentially. If you filter it properly and it's okay and all that, right? Potentially. In that solution, great, right? Build that community, get that community garden, get that neighborhood watch, do the water catchment. If you can't, you're limited, right? You're limited on what you've got on hand. And then it's bug out, right? It's moved to greener pastures time. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So next challenge, that was storage space, replenish supplies. We hit on that a little bit. Security is a challenge in an apartment. Walls are thin, just about anywhere. Maybe if you're in a high-rise building and the walls are all concrete, that's a slightly different story. But you have a lot of people, a lot of density of people. If your neighbor's starving and you have food, obviously you're probably not going to tell him that. At some point he's going to knock on your door, he's going to kick in your door. Depending on where you live, you might kick a hole through the wall, right? Certainly having a defensible perimeter in an apartment can be very difficult. Same thing in an RV because the walls are very thin. The difference is RV you could bug out, right? You can drive around potentially, assuming you had that ability, to greener pastures. But if you're in an apartment, Walls are thin. It's hard to set up a secure perimeter. There's a lot of people there. Things pass through walls, right? People kick a hole through the wall, come through the floor, come through the ceiling, right? If this is some long-term situation, whether it's a blackout that goes on for a very long time, whatever the situation is, if people are starving, they're going to start going door to door and be like, hey, do you guys have food? Hey, HOA, do you guys have food? We're rounding up all the food, and we're gonna divide it up evenly amongst everyone. There's hard to do a secure perimeter, right? So once again, solutions on that is that idea. You either build a community, you have a neighborhood watch, you have a strong HOA, you know, hey, we're all going to come together, you have a plan. It's possible. Some people have that. I think that most people don't, right? And then in that case, when your security is compromised, when you're out of food, when you're out of water, that's when you start talking about bug out, right? Not a big fan of bug out, but in that situation where you're out of food, you go to greener pastures. You're out of water, you go to greener pastures. You're not safe where you're at. You got to go to greener pastures, and whether that's walk out or whether that's drive out, depends once again on the situation. If you're in a big city, there was that thing in New York many years ago, big blackout, big power out. People weren't really able to drive home because the roads all got clogged up very quickly, right? And the tunnels got clogged up and all of that. Drive out may not be an option, right? You probably won't know until you get to that situation, but I would say be prepared to walk out. And for bug out means a bag, right? You need a bug out bag. You're going to have to understand how much physically you can carry, how far you can go. I think the most important part of bug out is to have that bug out plan, and that where are you going to go. And if you don't have anywhere to go, you don't know anybody that you could go to, you don't have a location in mind, you're just sort of a refugee at that point, right? And yeah, you're out of food and water. Yeah, it's not safe, so you got to go. So you just start walking. No guarantee, right? There's going to be food and water where you need to go, that it's going to be safer where you need to go. So you definitely want a bug out plan. Get an idea ahead of time of where you're going to go if you had to, right? Maybe there's a national park. A lot of people say national park's not a good idea because a lot of people are going to be there. But you should develop a plan and think about some routes, right? How are you going to get there? In California, wildfires, you got to have that bug out plan, right? How are we getting out of here if there's a wildfire? Any kind of an emergency situation where you have to bug out, you don't just walk out the door and be like, we're just going to go. Like, that's the worst plan. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what's going to be there. If that's all you have, then that's what you have. And you pack your bag with as much as you have or you can carry, and you just head out and hope to end up somewhere better, right? See, this is one other thing I wanted to hit on. I know we skipped into bug out. Sanitation, another potential challenge in an apartment, prepping in an apartment, is the toilets, right? If water's out, toilet won't flush. If the city sewer's out, blocked up, whatever it is, you could have stuff backing up into the house. That could push you into bug out really quick. Maybe you can seal off the toilets or something like that. Think about alternative sanitation. We've done videos on it before of the bucket toilets. Obviously, this was my food bucket, but things like bucket toilets aren't a bad idea. Some alternative option for sanitation, whether you have baby wipes or something like that, some way to clean your body if the water's off. You obviously still want to brush your teeth. Any kind of sanitation. How are you going to go to the bathroom? What are you going to do with the stuff once it comes out? Keep that very family friendly. Sanitation can be an issue, right? Especially in, once again, population dense areas. There's a higher risk of septic going out, sewer going out, water treatment going out, any of that in some kind of a disaster, right? Which is what we're talking about as prepping. So I think that's everything. That's everything I wanted to hit on. Once again, 30 Days Preparedness 2025. Hashtag it. Thanks to JJ and Michelle, Big Valley Living, for having us on. And thanks to everybody that's watching the videos, that's liking, that's subscribing. Please stick around, making comments. I said this really is probably our last video on the collab. I can make more videos, right? If there's something you want to see, something you want to talk about, let me know, right? We're going to continue the channel, but if I'm happy, more than happy to open it up for any kind of requests. So, as always, thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.